So I can start maybe about the sort of like the growing interest in contemporary African art. And my point of view has always been, there's always been fascinating art that came out of the African continent, I think way beyond this recent kind of like attention. I've just think that the light is just shine on the African continent now, but there has over the years been a lot of exciting and talented and powerful artworks that were coming out of the African continent. It's only that now it has been given attention, which is a very good thing, which I think we also need to have that limelight to showcase to the rest of the world our creativity and our uniqueness as artists, as well as the stories. I think because the African continent is quite diverse, with diverse backgrounds and cultures, and all that makes the artwork as well very powerful, very strong, very interesting, with various stories of artists from different backgrounds. So I think that is, for me, my take on the sort of like growing international attention on contemporary African art. And I think there's exciting emerging talent also coming out of the continent, whether it's also local people living and practicing on the continent, or those who have left and are practicing in the diaspora, maybe in Europe or in America, in the UK, everywhere in the world. There is still some exciting work that is coming. And I think it was, I would say it was overdue that we should get their attention as well. So just to give a background, obviously, of the political and social sort of like interpretation in my work. Highly politicized society in Zimbabwe, there was a little bit of obviously repression and a little bit of less of freedom of expression in order, obviously, in speaking on certain things. There's a lot of censorship. And my only sort of outlet was through the paintings. So I would comment visually on what was happening around me. So, and what was happening around me at the time was all political, and then the social and economic mayhem that was happening in my home country in Zimbabwe. So at that point in time, I responded to my environment, hence the work had a political commentary in it. So it was, for me, the situation that I found myself in, and as I started my practice, there was all these political upheavals happening in the country, and my only way to sort of respond to it was to include it in my work and comment and hopefully encourage discussion on these things that people couldn't actually talk because there was this sort of like censorship and repression by the then government. So that's where the political and social. And then I left Zimbabwe, obviously, because I wanted to get to a space where I could actually also create work without too much of the noise, and have a community also of artists and art professionals that I could collaborate or work with and sort of like move my career in another direction. So, and then when I came to South Africa as well, it had its own political situations and social and economic issues that I also interpreted in my work as well. So then, from then on, I realized that actually politics is not the politics of state politics, as in political parties and politicians of society or of our lives. There's politics in, I say the politics in the art world. There's politics in relationships between a man and a woman. There's always some form of politics. There's politics in school systems. So it's whenever there is two sort of forces interacting and they're crashing against each other in terms of opinions or other aspects, then there is some form of friction which causes the politics and somehow an imbalance. And that is what now I'm trying to also integrate in my work, especially in responding to situations that I find myself in as an artist as well. So the early part was obviously state politics, as I said, with my influence of where I grew up and where I started, and now into another kind of form of politics as I develop my practice. Yeah, yeah. So I think so my background is that I actually never went to any art school. I was mentored by uh, a very famous Zimbabwean painter called Helen Liros, and other group of artists as well who were sort of like a bit above my generation or of about the same generation as myself. And for me, I was introduced obviously to the art history by interacting with my mentor and my other fellow practicing artists. And then from then on, I discovered these masters. So obviously, I never had the ignorance of not recognizing that there were other people who did amazing and fantastic paintings before I did. So then I sort of like, in my way of studying them was to actually integrate some of the work that they created, some of the works that interested me into the work that I was creating. So sort of my early work in my first show in Cape Town, there was a lot of influences from reinterpretations. So instead of just reading about it, I actually looked at their pictures and tried to put myself in, if they were in a studio setting and painting, and then I would take that and then incorporate into my work in the same manner that I would like, with a different message, obviously, because it's two different time frames.
Yeah.
And incorporate my message into the work and make it work to come up with a painting. So the references are basically that, me trying not to be ignorant of the greatness that existed between me, and then trying to make a rearrangement to create a new body of work that comments on the contemporary but inspired by the past. That there was that play as well. So yeah, so that's how the kind of like the references of old masters started to incorporate into my work. Yeah, yeah. You actually are not supposed to see the character. The character is supposed to be mysterious. That's what I actually want people to say. But who is this? Who's this? Who's this hand? Who's this character that we don't see?
Yeah.
What has he done? What is he doing? And I think sort of like inviting people to have those questions might, in my way, make them look at the painting longer and interpret and come up with their own ideas after looking at the painting. So there's always these elements where you want to try to elements in the work that make people question, why is that thing there? Why can't we see this character? Why is he opening the door? Or why is he hiding? Why can't I see him completely? And also in many cases, I've always said that might be the artist as well, because the artist is always obvious in the background, and then represent what everybody sees is the paintings. So in trying maybe to hide myself in the painting as well, you might be maybe that's the artist hiding behind the ATM saying, pay me for my paintings. So there's all that also play that comes into the work as I work in the studio. Obviously, I work on a painting such as those large pieces over a period of time. So every time you go in and come out for every session, you incorporate different things as I work. So I might start with an idea, say, okay, I wanted to paint a painting about maybe the politics in the art world. I have a certain idea of how it might look like, but then at the end, various factors come into the way, various influences, something that I would have heard on the radio or read about in a newspaper, or somebody had a discussion with me about a specific topic, and that ends up in the painting, and then it becomes a whole other new thing. So that is also sometimes why it's quite difficult to explain some of the work. So I've always said the paintings must speak for themselves. I must just speak for what influenced me to create the work, the different aspects, to say, oh, that was this was that. But in essence, the painting must stand on its own, and I think speak on its own. And as a viewer or an audience looks at it, whatever interpretations or whatever way it's speaking to them is the right way for that particular audience. Yeah, so sort of like multiple interpretations, which we are all obviously biased, and we come with our own sort of like backgrounds and things that we have experienced that can be projected in the painting. And that is always also very interesting for me when people come to tell me things that they see in the painting that I have never thought about when I was creating the painting. So that for me was like amazing. It's something that makes me realize that it's broad. The project by artists, for artists. So it was a group of Zimbabwean artists and myself who decided that we actually needed an event that happens that is purely focused on the contemporary art scene that is happening in our own country, even though we are all scattered around the world. Some artists are in South Africa, in the UK, in Europe, in America. But we have been successful individually in our own capacities, but never really actually done something united to showcase not only to the world, but to our own fellow countrymen back in Zimbabwe, because the country, in any case, is in very bad situation. And I think we might, in one way, try to contribute to some form of positivity. And I think art always thrives also when things are quite difficult, and that's where more creativity and improvisation of resources and creativity comes along. And for me, that's why I believe there is so much richness in the art that is coming out of Zimbabwe, because the artists are pushing against boundaries of surviving and also still trying to become an artist. And the work becomes so powerful. And I think if that can be showcased in a group of, in a singular event that is actually showcasing the contemporary Zimbabwean artists living and working or commenting on the situation happening in Zimbabwe. And hence we decided to come up with Art Harare, which we wanted to look we call it an art fair, but I think it's more than an art fair. It's more like a coming together of the artists to showcase their work, to have some form of coming together and putting an event. Because what we're having with Art Harare is apart from showing the artworks, we will have a program of conversation, a lot of programmings and a lot of discussions and conversations about our state and how different influences from different parts of the world, or how our experiences in different spaces help, I don't know, maybe future generations in the country. So that's how basically the idea of Art Harare came about, because in essence, there was nobody kind of trying to come up with something similar to that. And I think the artists took it upon themselves to say, okay, we're not gonna wait for the country to get into a better state. We're not gonna wait for somebody who is in an institution, be it the National Gallery or a commercial gallery, to come and say, okay, we are putting this together. We want the artists to come. So we decided we do it on our own. And we took we leveraged on this huge digital move into the online space. So obviously, as a result of COVID-19, there has been a huge shift in the art world, where there's a lot of audiences that are consuming if that's the right word, consuming art online. And in that way, we thought, okay, we will use that platform and launch ourselves and have an online platform or an online art fair where we showcase the work of Zimbabwean artists and also have conversations that doesn't restrict us in terms of boundaries, because we have artists here in South Africa, artists in Zimbabwe, in the UK, in America, but we can all come together in this space which is online. And I think that is crucial for the development of the contemporary art scene in Zimbabwe, because there hasn't been much infrastructure. And I think there's only about 3 or 4 commercial galleries in the National Gallery. And that is not sustainable for careers of artists, especially young and emerging artists that are coming. They will always be going to new spaces, which is not a bad thing, that you can go to another country or another city to develop your career. But I always feel having that locality where people can understand where you're coming from, your background, your work, and you interact, and you can be an inspiration for another generation of artists that come. Yeah, no, 50 artists. We have artists like Wallen Mapondera is showcasing, Dan Houter. We have Krejia Mkwanazi is also showcasing some of her piece. We have artists like Masimba Wati, who is based in Michigan in the United States. We have Dyken Wiley, who's an artist based in London. We have, who's the other one? We also have Kudzanai Churai, who's going to be part of a conversation also about his experience as being an international and well-respected artist, talking to more of a younger generation of artists as well. We have Michele Mattison, we have Opshenya Hunji. So the founders is myself and a colleague of mine called, her name is Aya Kujunaris. She's Zimbabwean. She's based in London. She studied at Sotheby's Art Institute. So she has a background in art business, and she had done a lot of work also in sort of like international art fairs and international exhibitions. So we are leveraging on her experience also of working in an international space. And myself as an artist, I have over the years created very good relationships with local artists and international artists and other players in the art world. So all we're just doing is bringing all those people together and creating an event and trying to come up with a program. Actually, from Zimbabwean, with a focus on Zimbabwean artists in one space and creating a platform for we can have a conversation and dialogue on different aspects. Yeah, no, it did. I think collaboration, nobody makes it on their own. You actually have to have some form of community. I'll tell you, when I had some interviews with other artists, they were also quite excited that we'll be able to talk about certain issues that were being discussed in private, and people having the politics I was mentioning about, the politics, some aspects of the Zimbabwean contemporary art scene. And I say, here's a platform, let's talk about it. What is the issues? How can we solve it? How can we do? Because as artists, we are creative individuals, and we can also come up with creative solutions to problems and opportunities that may come our way. So our creativity shouldn't stop when we're in the studio and creating the work. I think we can expand it into different aspects as well. Just how we are planning for Atarare, and hopefully maybe we'll see what happens. It might develop, as you say, to an association, to maybe something coming up out of such coming together. because from my point of view, there has been a lot of Zimbabwean artists that have been successful. You have a million at the Venice Biennale every second, third year. Nothing that happens uh, in our own country that is a celebration of what we do. Yeah, I think with the lockdowns, what happened obviously internationally all over the sort of like the art world, when the lockdown started happening, I think most exhibitions and museums and galleries had to close and reschedule exhibition, which was quite unfortunate for artists, because for some artists like myself who rely on, on, on on the galleries and museums and art fairs to showcase my work and participate in the contemporary art scene. And when everything shut down, it was kind of like sort of a stressful point in any practicing artist, I think, who would have planned to have shows, and then all of a sudden everything was cancelled and everything was shut down. But I think on a lighter note, what was exciting was that the fact that there was not too much pressure, not too much deadlines, not too much events happening, gave me, and I think more artists as well, the opportunity to focus on their work without too much pressure of the sort of like the commercial part, or the pressure to exhibit your work or to be part of an art fair. So that for me was quite important, that you sat in the studio, you only focused on your work and didn't do anything else. So I think that is one positive effect that I would say came out of the new shift and the new reality we have of COVID-19. It actually made the artist look at themselves and say, what can I create in this time when it's quiet? Obviously responding to obviously what is happening, but also the focusing on your work without even knowing, will I show it in my next exhibition or not? I'm just creating for now. So that is quite positive, and I'm looking forward to showcasing the work that I created also during this lockdown period, to share it when everything sort of like opens up. Well, that was becoming sort of like a beast for me. It was taking too much of my attention, and yeah, I just wanted simplicity in the studio and not having all these things happening around me, which always obviously happening on social media, and wanted to, yeah, to have the focus on my work, the focus on myself, on my family, and cut sort of obviously I'm aware, I read the newspapers, I listen to the news, I talk to people, I have very friends now all over the world, and I can always have this conversation of what is happening in the world, than having, yeah, space, which is fantastic. I think social media is important, but I think for me, I've always said, I think it was time for me to just focus on myself and create the work and showcase it in other platforms rather than in online spaces. Oh, thank you. Gracias.